excited to do kind of an encore presentation of our summit session from last month. And today we're going to talk about 10 user adoption tips and training best practices you can implement today. So we'll just take a couple minutes to tell you who we are. So my name's Heidi Newhauser, and I am Director of CRM Projects for Reenhanced. We're located outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We have a cool focus. We focus on CRM rescue projects, which is really fun. I've been working in user adoption for about 10 years, and I am currently the CRM User Group chapter leader for our Philadelphia chapter. So if you're ever in the Philadelphia area, come check us out. And my fun fact outside of the CRM world, I coordinate a local running club, and I am a proud soccer mom. Lee, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name's Lee Svensson, and I'm a sales system analyst at WEX Health. I'm a customer, not a partner. I'm the dynamic CRM administrator at WEX Health, and I'm really passionate about promoting continuing CRM education for my users. And my fun fact is I love classic movies. I'm the movie geek that stands outside to go to old black and white movies at the local movie theater.
That's awesome. All right, so real quick, we'll just review our learning objectives for today. So hopefully by the end of this hour, you've learned how to leverage out-of-the-box functionality in Dynamics 365 to aid in user adoption of your organization. We hope you can apply some new user adoption practices at your company and understand how people learn and how people learn differently and how you can apply that to user adoption challenges that you might have. So with no further ado, here are our tips. So these are the 10 tips we're going to talk about today. We're going to spend some more time on some of the tips than others, and hopefully we don't run out of time like we did at Summit. So first, we're going to talk about learning styles, which I really love to talk about. And second tip, Lee is going to tell you about creating a CRM user group. Third is involving your end users with a variety of CRM skill and comfort levels, which is the important part there. Tip 4 is about simplifying, streamlining, and repeating. Tip 5, business rules. Tip 6, we're going to talk about business process flows. 7 will be model-driven apps. 8 is offering role-based learning when you're rolling out your training. Offer ongoing learning opportunities. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about training materials best practices. So, Lori, could you throw the poll up real quick? I just want to get an understanding of what version of CRM everybody is currently on. Most of the tips and features we're going to talk about are available to everyone 2013 and above. I just want to make sure I can point that out if anyone's not on the newer versions.
All right, fabulous, Heidi. Let's give it a moment. Looks like we have most of our audience that has voted. So great, thanks all. I'll go ahead and close it and share those results out with the group. Looks like we have 83% D365 online, a few on 2016, and then 6% below on the older versions.
Okay, is anyone 2011 or older?
So the grouping is 2013, 2011 or older, so I'm not quite sure. We got 6% that said yes in that category.
No problem. There's only a few things that we'll talk about today that might not be available to any of you who are on 2011 or older. So I'll make a point to kind of point those out as we go along. So sorry, the sun is coming in weirdly on my video here. So first, we want to talk about learning styles. So I want to spend a couple minutes and help you learn about learning styles. So you've probably seen these. I know some organizations will even give them to new employees. So there are things, the Myers-Briggs. So I've seen this a lot in corporate environments where you might get a test and they'll group you in. Are you an INTJ or an ESTG? There's Kolb learning styles, which are really interesting too. But what I like to talk about and what I've found is a really nice fit for adult learners in technology and CRM in particular is the VARK learning style. So VARK is an acronym that just stands for these 4 different things: visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic. So let's talk a little bit about each of these. So what does this mean? If you're a visual learner, which is represented by this kind of left column, and we're going to kind of go through this in a number of ways. If you're auditory, if your primary learning style is like a webinar, would be really great for you. You are understanding and learning through hearing people speak. Reading and writing are those of us who have a notebook in front of us and we're taking notes as the webinar is going around. And kinesthetic learners, you see I talk with my hands a lot. I am definitely a kinesthetic learner. So beyond this, I wanted to give info about how you learn best personally. What resonates best to you here? Hearing me read the words cat, dog, horse, fish, computer, phone, reading the list on the left hand, and so we're going to give you all a test. And at the end of this webinar, you had to tell me what those 6 items were. What would you use? Would you take notes? Would you look at the pictures or listen? So hopefully that kind of illustrates it all. You will have these slides. There's a link at the bottom here, so you can just click on this. And then that's going to open up the BARC questionnaire if you really want to figure it out, which everybody likes taking these little personality tests, right? So you just answer all these questions and find out what you are, if you're interested. So learning styles is all fun and good, but how can we apply that to CRM? So I like to talk about applying learning and training materials across all learning styles. So as somebody who's doing training, if you're the person tasked with training, it's your responsibility to deliver the material, and most likely you're going to default to the learning style that you're most comfortable with, which, you know, to me is not having my webcam on right now. I am personally not the most comfortable being on camera, but I know that that's going to reach those of you who are visual learners, which is why we've done it. So we can apply this in a number of ways to CRM. And I tried to get some examples here for you. So depending on what learning style people are, they'll learn differently. So live training is the first bullet point here, and you can see that that reaches all learning styles. And I don't think anyone will be surprised by that. I hope you're not surprised learning the best way to train your users is live and in person, which I know is not always a feasible option. You might be spread geographically. You might have remote employees that don't come into the office. For whatever reason, live training might not be your best and always available option. So here's some other things you can do. Your visual learners. Again, this is the left column here with the little boy in the magnifying glass. PowerPoint is really good for visual learners. I know a lot of people pride themselves on not doing PowerPoint and not having slides, but you might be missing the mark if you're that kind of a person, because other people might use your slides to understand and learn more. A video library is wonderful for your visual learners. So if you haven't started creating a video library, it's very, very simple to do. If you want, you can email me afterwards if you're interested in learning more about video library. And I can let you know some free resources you can use to create some video content for your users. Live demos, webinars, again, turning on this webcam, and case studies. They're all great for your visual learners. So moving on to our auditory, so those that learn by hearing things, lecture, webinar, podcast, things like this are good ways to reach those learners. And then your reading and writing. This is great for quick reference guides, job aids, like really simple instructional things in writing. Hands-on labs and case studies are great for this learning style as well. And then finally, we come to our kinesthetic learners, those of us who like to stand up and move around and talk with our hands and get in the system. They're the ones who, when you're doing CRM training, will tell you, this all sounds great, but I'm not really going to be comfortable with it until I get in there and I do it. So those are kinesthetic learners in CRM. So one-on-one, small group, coaching, hands-on labs, case studies, all really good for that. And I wanted to take this a step further and talk about how you can apply learning styles when you're designing and building your system. So if you're a system administrator or system customizer, thought this might be a little helpful. So things that'll help your visual learners are to visualize your data. So we do that by graphs, charts, diagrams, dashboards, implementing mapping capabilities in your system. Just keep in mind your form design. That's a little bit more important for your visual learners. And business process flows, anything that will guide the process in a visual way. I had a hard time coming up with something for auditory learners in terms of design and build. This one's a bit of a stretch, but teaching them about voice to text and how you can use that. For our reading and writing, if you can do lists and option sets, those are really helpful for that learning style. And then talking about task and activity management in your system. And then finally, kinesthetic learners, if you embed videos in your training library, or within your system somehow, and then drill down reporting and dashboards are good there. So I know I spent a lot of time on that, but I really love talking about it. I find it really interesting and how you can kind of think about that and apply it. So I'm going to hand the reins over to Lee for tip number 2 and tip number 3.
Thank you, Heidi. One of the things that we did at WEX Health was, like I'm sure a lot of system administrators, was struggling to try to get people really kind of involved in our CRM instance. So one of the things that we came up with was to create a user group that was specifically to develop to talk about our own CRM instance and processes. So when we were going to do this, the first thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that all teams are represented: sales, marketing, legal, any teams that were using CRM. I mean, we don't want the whole team involved, but just at least a representative to so that we could figure out the processes for each of those teams. We also wanted to make sure, and this is really easy to do, and I found myself wanting to do it so bad, is just picking the fans. If you do that, it's almost a disservice, because you really want to make sure that you get the users that are less enthusiastic as well, because if you can get your less enthusiastic users to become your biggest fans, that will go a long ways. The next one you notice is in red, and I think this is probably one of the most important bullet points on this list. If needed, co-opt a neutral third party, such as a Microsoft partner, like Heidi. If you have somebody like Heidi in your area who can, come out or call in or have a webinar and talk to your users, it's amazing how the users interact differently with a neutral third party person, because they just consider them maybe more knowledgeable or more neutral, and it really made a difference for us. So if you can do it, have a Microsoft partner or somebody like that to come out and talk to your users. And it's amazing, the information. I know we learned a lot by having a Microsoft partner come out and we just did webinars, and they just listened. It was great. Ask simple questions. You don't really have to overcomplicate it with the user group. Just meet and just ask them, how do you use opportunities? How do you use contacts? How do you use accounts? What do you like? What do you don't like? It's really not rocket science, and it's amazing. Once you ask people, they're actually more than willing to tell you what they really like, or even more, what they really don't like. So I would really just let people, don't overcomplicate it with big plans. Just ask them what they want out of their CRM system. Once you start doing that, I would develop a plan, and I wouldn't try boil the ocean. I would try to do it one issue at a time. If you find out teams, and I found this in my own company, where different teams are using opportunities differently. And once that was verbal and out in the air, we said, okay, let's start with that. And we discussed back and forth to find a middle ground where the team said, yeah, that's acceptable, we can do it this way, then it get everybody using the same thing. And then at the end, let the people on the group be conduits to their own teams. Having the CRM administrator be the person who is always the one delivering all the messages, sometimes you're almost like a buzz, but if you get people in their groups going back to their own teams, then the message sometimes flows a lot better. So I'm just curious, maybe we can find out at some point how many people have their own user groups.
Sorry, I forgot to give that poll to Lori in advance.
That's okay. It's okay. we can find out at the end. The next thing that with the user group here, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, is when you're dealing with user groups or with, make sure that you're also including varied skill levels. You just don't want your super users involved, because that's a little bit of an injustice too. I would try to go up and down the scale. So as you're going through the teams, maybe get somebody who's brand new, because they might have a different perspective. They might have come from some place that used CRM in a different way or had a different type of CRM system. It's always interesting to get different perspectives in this. I do try to always include some influencers in there, both positive and negative, because whether it's CRM or other issues within the company, people tend to gravitate towards certain people who just seem to influence how things are going. So I would have everybody from super tech savvy to somebody who's hiding stuff in spreadsheets and making sure the CRM administrator doesn't know about that. And maybe we can slowly switch those characteristics.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to move on to tip 4, which is simplify, streamline, and repeat. So I have a lot of things in this tip. We'll talk a little more in depth about some of this, but what are your goals as a system administrator, or what should they be, or what could they be? Keep it simple, system admin. Nobody likes an overly complicated CRM system, especially your users. So on the left, I have a couple goals for you. Minimize required fields. That is a huge barrier to entry. If you're asking your sales team, for example, to enter all of their opportunities and you have like 8 required fields, you're probably not going to get as many opportunities entered in your system as if you have 1 required field, and then you use some extra out-of-the-box functionality to kind of change your field level requirement as they process through. Goal number 2, eliminate duplicate data entry points. So this is a really big one. You don't want to ask your salespeople to enter something on the lead, and then when it becomes an opportunity, you have to enter that again. Keep your forms clean. So that goes along with our first tip about your visual learners. Make sure those forms are nice and clean. And your number 1 goal, increase user adoption and overall happiness. So what tools do you have in CRM to help you do this? So your toolkit's on the right-hand side. There are things like tooltips. If you don't know what a tooltip is, I'm going to show you very, very quickly. I'm going to bring over my CRM system. So a tooltip, if I open up a record in CRM, and if I am a user and I don't necessarily know what one of the fields is, I just hover over the field and a little box that pops up with text. That's a tooltip. And on the back end of CRM, I will just show you real quickly. You're just going to edit. Oh, I don't know if I have a field in here. I'm going to come into the classic interface to make this a little bit easier. But you're actually just going to come in and open up a field in CRM. And there's a little box that you can use to add that in. And this is being annoying, so I will show you that once we get back there for another one. So tooltips are great because they're really simple to add. So just type some text in that description box when you're building your field. Your toolkit also includes multiple field types. So it will help your users tremendously. It will also help management in your reporting building if you use the correct field type. So if you're asking somebody for a dollar amount, fill the currency field. If you're asking them to give you a number, make it a number field, not a free text. So try to use the right field type for what you're trying to accomplish. Forms, you can use multiple forms, design different forms for different users, which becomes really interesting if you're going to build a Power App, and then you just show that one. Field level mapping, I added some slides this morning. I told Lee I was going to add a little bit because I'm doing a lot of field level mapping right now, and I thought it would be cool to show people. Field level security, you can limit who can edit a field by adding a field level security checkbox on that field and then creating a security role. A security profile, I'm sorry. Then we have security roles, which can help limit who can do what, who can see what, who can edit what, business process flows, business rules, model-driven apps, and lots more. So there's a lot of cool stuff here. And again, I just added a couple fields here on field level mapping because I have had some customers recently who weren't aware that you could do this and how simple it is. So I want to show you real quick. You can look at these slides later. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. So field level mapping is taking one field on one entity and having it move over to another entity without having the user to do anything. So this is that one goal we talked about where you want to minimize the point data entry points. So it's done on the relationship. So you're going to add your one-to-N relationship or your N-to-one relationship to your solution file. And then you're going to click this button here, mappings, which is circled in red, which is going to look like this pop-up. And you're just going to select the 2 fields. So you have your source entity. I think in this example, I did lead, and then your target entity, which would be all of your fields on opportunity. So let's talk about the rules of field level mapping. Fields have to be the same type and format. You cannot map a free text field to a number field. The length of your target field needs to be equal or greater to the length of the source field. So I personally ran into this problem this week with a customer of ours. Their target field was a single line of text, or actually I'm reversing that. So it was a single line of text we were trying to map to a multi-text group. So we just had to change the field type. The target field cannot be mapped to another field that's already mapped somewhere. So you can only map one field, and that kind of makes sense, right? You don't want to have CRM trying to figure out which one wins. The source field has to be visible on the form. So you cannot do field level mapping if you have a hidden field on your form. And finally, if mapping option sets, you have to make sure the integer values, not the text. You know how you're building an option set and your values have the words and the numbs have to match. And my little tip, global option sets make it simple. When in doubt and you're building an option set, make it a global option set. All right, I know I'm going through this quickly. Use business rules. Business rules are awesome. Business rules are one of my favorite things in Dynamics 365. So those of you who answered 2013 or older, this is not available on 2011 or older. It rolled out in 2013. If you're on 2013, you can do business rules. Yay, hopefully that's everybody. So what can we do with these? We can add recommendations. We can lock a field or unlock a field. We can show an error message, set a field value, set a default value, set business required, and set visibility. So these are things that were previously done in 2011 and in older versions using JavaScript or other custom code. And now we can configure them as system administrators, which is awesome. So a couple notes, in order to build one of these, you have to be a system administrator or system customizer. I want to point out the scope, because when you're creating a business rule for the first time or editing an existing one, there is a scope listed on the top right-hand corner, and it's kind of important to pick the right one. So you can have your scope set to a specific form, which means your business rule will run only on that one form. So if you only want it on one specific form, that's what you pick. All forms, the rule is applied on all forms for that entity. So if you want it to run on everything and stay within CRM, we want to do that. That is called the client side. So if you're not familiar with that, this rule is running on the client side. So when your user opens the form, that's going to trigger this to be run. Entity, which I think is the default, that rule is applied to all forms and the server. And the server is the important part here. So that does not run client side, that runs server side. And what that means is it gets put into a pecking order of everything else that's running server side. So you may have unknown dependencies on workflows, plugins, and anything else you have running on the server. So if you have a business rule and if it's not performing as expected, just take a look at what your scope is. If it's set to entity, maybe try moving it to all forms and see if that resolves it. Finally, I want to point out exceptions, because I always like to know the exceptions to things. You cannot put a business rule in a composite field, so like full name or address one on the composite field, and it does not work on multi-select option sets. So I hope that all makes sense, and I think we'll move on in the interest of time. Business process flows. I think everybody knows business process flows at this point. That is the guided process at the top of an entity that users can kind of like move throughout the process. Some people love business process flows. Some people don't use them. You can turn them off in your system if you don't use them. But they can be really valuable from a user adoption standpoint. It can be very useful from a customer standpoint as well, because it's an opportunity to standardize a process, the service process, the sales process, or anything else you want to create. You can have a business process flow running on any entity, an out-of-the-box entity, custom entities. You'll get a few out of the box. So I listed them here: the lead to opportunity sales process, your opportunity sales process, and your phone to case. You can take these and use them the way they are. You probably want to configure them for your individual business processes. A lot of times I'll take that opportunity sales process and throw in some more entities in there. So things like quotes and orders, depending on how far you use CRM to kind of build things out. Other things you can do is you can apply security roles to your business process flows. So if you want to build a process but only have it visible to a subgroup of users, you can apply a security role there. And you can get really complex with branches. You can add conditionals on your business process flows and kind of play with it that way. So I am opening up make.powerapps.com. Those of you who are online, this is the new experience. So when you're in your solution file and it has that little yellow banner at the top, it says there's a new way to do this. Click here to try it. That takes you to make.powerapps.com, which is here. So that's like a different training we should do on a webinar sometime, but it's really cool stuff. So here it is. We open this up. This is our business process flow. So as you can see, you have your different stages here, and then within each stage, you have individual steps. So you'll have the out-of-the-box ones. I don't recommend using out-of-the-box that often. You can just customize this and configure it the way that you need it to be. So it's very simple to use. We've got the add at the top. You can add a new stage, which then it has these little plus icons, so you can add where you want it. You can add a condition. So these are really cool if you want to have kind of a branched process. It maybe For instance, if your organization sells to consumers direct and they also sell B2B, maybe you want a differentiated process. Well, this is where you could use branching, which is very cool. And I'm taking too long, Lee, I'm sorry. So let's talk about limitations of business rules. Again, I like to point out the limitations. This slide is not a best practice. Please don't add this many business process flows, stages, or entities. Remember our tip number 4, simplify. We want to keep things simple for the users. But your limitations on business rules, you can't have any more than 10 business process flows running on one entity. A process cannot contain any more than 30 stages. So if I just come back to CRM for a quick moment, right here, that's what I mean. Don't put 30 on here, but you can put up to 30 here if you need to. And there are no more than 5 entities per process. So you can only link 5 entities. Model-driven apps. This is my second favorite thing behind business rules. So model-driven apps are really cool and they're really great for user adoption. And I'm really sorry to those of you who are in 2016, 2015, 2013, 2011 or older because you can't use these yet. I do have good news for those of you on premise. If you're version 8.2, you do have access to model-driven apps. And I've implemented some of these for an on-premise customer, which is awesome. So you can take advantage of this Dynamics 365 online or on-premise. So model-driven apps, there is a lot we could talk about in model-driven apps. And I just want to touch on a few things. We want to talk about security, app designer, sitemap components, managing properties, benefits to users. I'm promoting this awesome blog series. Uh-oh, I'm about to get cat photo bombs. I'm really sorry about that. So there's a link to a blog series. I'm calling it awesome because it's mine, but remove. So that is a blog series where I've written one article on each of these things, and it's a great reference, cat. So I will show you where that is real quick because it's a really cool thing. I wrote it with the only purpose of helping you build a Power Up. So if you come to reenhance.com/blog and you go to Power Apps, you can see them all here. So you can see this is the most recent one, how to manage properties. And I walk you through step-by-step screenshots. So I knew I wouldn't have enough time to go through everything today. I wanted to at least make sure that I was showing you that. So one thing I want to talk about is a troubleshooting tip. So if you ever hear from your users that they can't see an app in My Apps, or they're getting an error message saying it's not accessible, the very first thing you should do before spinning too many wheels, go into their security role and make sure the model-driven app read privileges is right here on the customization tab. So that can save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches. Just wanted to point that out. In the security realm for model-driven apps, in order to build the app, you either need this little green bubble next to that, or the create privileges on your security role, or be a system admin or system customizer. Things in Power Apps are all driven by your sitemap. So the sun is really bright. So let's come back over to Power Apps. Over here. And what I'd like to do is show you one of the apps. So this is the end user perspective. All your app that I'm going to show you have this streamlined view. And this is what makes model-driven apps so incredible for user adoption. So here's normal CRM, right, without a model-driven app, classic web interface. Look at all of these buttons and all of these places. And in CRM training, you might tell like, oh, inside sales, you don't have to worry about any of this. You're just going to come here and go to these 3 things. But even within that kind of interface, if I come to opportunities, I'm seeing all of these crazy views, right? That's a lot. And as a user, especially if it's a user new to CRM, that's very cumbersome and it's very difficult and it's a crutch in user adoption. So here's our streamlined app. Let's go to opportunities. So you can see all I have here is accounts, contacts, leads, and opportunities. It's very streamlined. And if I go to opportunities, I only have one view. How cool is that? This is one of those things, 2016 or older, you need JavaScript or custom code in order to do something like this. Today, as a system administrator, I can just come in here and play. So let's play. Here's the back end. So as a system administrator, this is what I built. And it took me about 5 minutes this morning to build in preparation for this call. So this is your canvas. This is your blank screen to play with for your app designer. So I'll show you what I had done this morning. I gave it a name. It's called Inside Sales. I like to put descriptions up. So this app is Streamline for the inside sales team. You can change your icon, which is just a fun little extra. I have that in the blog series, and make it whatever you want. So what does this look like to the user? You might be thinking, how does a user get here? They go to My Apps, and then every app is in here. Every app that they have security permissions to see. So another thing about security that I didn't talk about before is this Manage Roles button. So if I want to restrict this app access, all I do, and I might have done that too fast, is click on the ellipses, go to Manage Roles. By default, they might all be turned on, but I only have it on for a certain role. So if I wanted to add it, it's simply just clicking that button and saving, which is pretty fun. All right, and this is very cool too. You get a unified interface URL. So I can give this user group this URL. They bookmark this every time they go into CRM. They don't have to do anything. They just go directly to the Streamlined app, which is really fun. This app, let me check my time. This app is controlled by your sitemap. Your sitemap tells your users, let's reload that. So your sitemap will determine what people can see. So if I add an entity here, it's going to show up on the app. If I don't have an entity here on my sitemap, they won't be able to access anything with it. So let's put on our system administrator hats for a moment. Let's pretend the sales team has gotten back to you. They really like their inside sales app, but they're missing something. So maybe they're asking, can you add another group to this? We want to be able to see our activities because we can't see that now. So you come back, you open your solution file that has your app in here, and then you're going to come to your sitemap. So you can click the add button here to add an area. So an area is up at the top on the building side, just sales. This is your group and this is your sub area. So what does that mean to the user, right? This is, I don't have more than one area. This is my group right here, the entities, customer, and then my subgroup is accounts and contacts. So if we come back to our app designer, I'm going to click on our canvas here. And as with everything in the world of CRM, there are 3, 4, 5 ways to do something. So from here, you can use this add button to add your information, or you can take these over and drag them. It's one of those personal preference things. So I'm going to go to add group, and at default, it gives me new group. Really simple to change, put a title on, and that's what they're going to see. So we'll call it my work. Oh, put my hands on the right keys. So now we have a new area, my work, except we don't have any subgroups. So we're going to go to add and do our sub area. And now there's a lot of cool things in here. So you can add dashboards, you can add entity, you can add a web resource. Really cool part for CRM and what we're talking about today, training, URL. If you have a custom help library, throw your URL in here, and then the user can click here. It'll take it to whatever you already have, your video library, your SharePoint, whatever it is. So for this, we'll add entity, activity, save, publish. If you don't publish, you can't do anything with it. Awesome. And now, when I come back here, we're going to hard refresh. There we go. There's my work and activity. Super cool stuff, right? All right. I'm going to move on. I could spend the next 3 hours talking about that. Offer role-based learning. Lee, this one's you, right? Or is it me? I don't know. Go get it.
All right, fair enough. So one of the things that I've learned with offering, so I love to give all my users as much training as possible. I always feel everybody's a little undertrained. And what I've done is I've started breaking out videos and manuals and things like that that are function specific or role specific. So I don't want to overwhelm nobody. If you give out an 80 page manual, you know, who really looks through that? But if you give somebody, you know, if you break things out like on how to go from a lead to an opportunity, you know, if you have a 3-page document or a 3-minute video on that, people will go through stuff like that. So trying to make libraries of documentation or videos, or, you know, having live sessions based off of roles, you know, you may not get as many people looking at one specific thing, but the ones that are consuming it are going to consume the whole thing. So I think this is really an important from a learning perspective. Okay, offer ongoing learning opportunities. So this is kind of how I've kind of gotten involved with this, and actually presenting with Heidi. when I first started going to the user group conferences, my main thing was how am I going to get people involved? And one of the general topics was ongoing learning. So we kind of came up with the idea of monthly learning sessions. So I came back from the user group conference. I sat down with my marketing team and said, well, you know, how about can you guys help me market internally? And let's make learning sessions. We'll do it once a month. We'll do it 30 minutes in length, 20 minutes of content, 10 minutes of questions. Ask users what they have questions about. I do things like I use WebEx, but you could use Skype for business or Google Hangouts or whatever.
Or Teams.
Or Teams. Very good, very good. And record the sessions if possible to make them available for later. I think I'm using Microsoft Stream right now to have my video library. So the marketing team said, this is a great idea. And we actually have an intern that can help you with this. Do you want this to happen? I said, absolutely. And this is where things went off the rail for me a little bit. I told the intern, you can do whatever you want with this. I'm just going to show up. And I would have named it, you know, learning more about CRM. But then Lunch with Lee was born. And I've been embarrassed ever since. So Lunch with Lee, we actually do it once a month. The intern was great. She started getting me to do really wacky things. Here's an example of one of the emails. The marketing team's been great. Some of the swag that they bring back from conferences that they can't give away, we give away to our internal people, and they love it. So we're doing, you know, giveaways. You know, that was a Hawaiian shirt we were giving away. Sometimes we give away, you know, like $5 gift card to the local coffee places. It's amazing what, you know, people just love that stuff. You know, some of the giveaways are submit ideas for future Lunch with Lees. So, you know, now, and we're geographically, we're spread out. So we actually, when people come to town, they actually will stop by my cube and go, you're the Lunch with Lee guy. And it just, you know, people have tried to start tea with Lee and, you know, all kinds of really wacky stuff. But at the end, even though it's, you know, people giving me a bad time, it's kind of gotten wildly popular. And I've actually generally on a monthly basis, I can get upwards of 20 people on the call. Considering it's over lunch and it's not required, it's really kind of driven some of the users to get more involved. Then I also, like we were just talking about, we record using, in my case, we're using WebEx, and making the videos available for people who are on the road. Now, last year I talked to Heidi about this, and we started talking about presenting. But one of the things that she told me to do, going back to VARC, was, Lee, you need to start putting yourself on the screen, even though that will make you wildly uncomfortable. And she was right. I was wildly uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, people like that too. Some people like putting a face to what's going on. It makes it more real for them. So the Lunch with Lee thing has been a fun experience, and I at least the people in my own organization have really enjoyed it. Some of the things that I went back and forth on, and we tried to determine is, do you have a predetermined topic each time, or you just open it up for questions? We've ran it both ways. I don't want to tell you what to do. I sometimes will have it open for questions, but I have a predetermined topic in my back pocket in case people are quiet that day. To mute or not to mute, that's a question, and I've tried that both ways too, and people like it both ways. Some people don't like other people talking when the main speaker is speaking. Other people like it like a classroom where you just talk and stop the person. I prefer not to mute, but I know that some people, it goes both ways, so it depends on how serious the topic is what I'll do. Of course, go outside your comfort zone and introduce a webcam. The trick is also how to keep your topics fresh. I mean, how many times do you talk about opportunities, or, you know, it's interesting. I've actually even brought in guest speakers. The IT team has asked to come and talk a few times just because it's a good place to gather people. So that keeps it fresh as well. And always remember to refer users with questions to recording. So when people say, Lee, I'm confused about opportunities, and you go, aha, if you go out to Stream, there's a 20-minute video on that. Why don't you check that out and let me know if you have questions after that. And then I always try to survey the users for their opinions. Do they like it? Do they not like it? Them showing up tells me some, but it really also helps me try to drive the topics.
Good stuff. And tip 10, we're going to talk about training materials best practices. So I apologize in advance that neither Lee nor I have the ability to share specific training materials we've created. There's proprietary information on there, but we can talk about best practices and what we do to kind of succeed in the world of documentation and training materials, which can be very difficult. So the first thing I have up here is probably the most important consideration and tip I can give you when you are thinking about how to organize your training materials. Do it in how to leverage CRM in the day in the life. So I have delivered and sat through all different kinds of CRM training. And the most successful ones are when you focus on day in the life, when you focus on the use case. So take some time, understand your users, understand how they're using it. Think about how the technology within CRM can help them to do something that used to be painful before CRM, maybe manual reporting that they were doing in Excel. Now they have a view they can export it. You want to highlight that in your training. But really focus on how to leverage CRM within their day in the life. I mean, think of yourselves. You probably enjoy sitting through a training more directed towards you and your language, and you especially want those training materials in your vernacular. You don't really care too much about CRM functionality. I don't want to sit here and have somebody tell me, this is an account form, this is this field, this is that. No, I need to know if a phone call comes in, I need this documentation, this reference guide, whatever you're making for them, to easily show me when my phone call comes in. I go to global search first. I type in the phone number that just called me. I see if it's in my system. If it is, then here's the workflow. If it's not, here's the workflow. So organizing all of your materials in that way is definitely a way to succeed in the very difficult world of creating training materials. I guess the second one, we'll just move on, is know your culture and your users. So you have a couple options here. Do you want to create custom content? Yes. Or do you want to use Microsoft provided documentation? So in a perfect world, you're going to develop custom content every time, but you probably don't have a full-time job to create CRM training materials. So we're going to give you some options here for using your own custom materials, as well as what Microsoft can provide for you. Again, along with your culture and your users, you know your people best. So Lee was making a joke about who wants to read that 60-page training manual. I don't. But in some cultures, that's still a useful thing. So you know your people best. If you don't, you can start talking to them. Well, like Lee said, ask questions, survey users. That stuff's great. You should definitely do that. And once you understand the organizational culture and your user group culture, you'll know what the right answer is. Do they want a one-page laminated quick reference guide that they can just put on their desk? Will they do better with a manual? Do you do a video library? You know how they'll work best. And again, just do what's best for your organization, because I can't tell you what's best. Number 3, use your CRM user group to review and provide feedback. Gosh, that can save you a lot of time and headaches. While you're developing training materials, even when you're drafting it, if it's an outline stage, whatever it is, take that user group that Lee was telling us about in the beginning of the session here and show them what you're working on. Or have like a really impromptu meeting where you just ask them open-ended questions. Again, a great tip from Lee. Do the open-ended simple questions. Be like, hey, would this help you do your job? They'll tell you right away if you're on the mark or not, and then you can adjust before you've gone too far down the process of creating materials. So we're first going to talk about custom training materials, because if you have the time, the budget, and the ability to create custom training materials, you should. So like Lee was saying, make that unique to your role in CRM. So don't do a one-size-fits-all training material. Do it specific for that individual user group. Your marketing team uses CRM a very different way than your salespeople do, who use it very differently than your customer service people. And maybe you have some people that wear many hats in your organization. You just give them whichever ones are appropriate for what they do. From an overall best practice standpoint, stick to 1 to 2 pagers, again, with a few exceptions based on your company culture. And the third one, I would say this is very important. Make your guides and all training materials clear, concise. If you could do it step-by-step with screenshots, even better. Another tip, if you are the system admin and you are creating a clear, concise training material with step-by-step and screenshots, you might want to, if you have access to a test account, give that test account the security role for your training, or toggle your user account. So don't develop all your training materials as system administrator, because you might see fields they can't see, especially if you have taken advantage of your awesome toolkit of stuff. Maybe you can see things on the form that they can't. So always good to make sure you're documenting everything as the user. So all that said, Microsoft has some great training materials out there as well. They could be a good starting point if you'd like. Some of them are more complicated than others. First, learning paths, which I don't know if you guys saw, but learning paths are now available in the new user interface for online, which is exciting because you couldn't do that for a while. So these are guided in-app help. If you haven't seen it yet, you would really sit down and kind of whiteboard or figure out what you wanted to do. And then you could implement that within Dynamics 365. I don't know terribly much about learning paths for Dynamics Online because it's brand new. I don't know if it's a preview thing or if it's out to everybody. So you might want to do a little research first. But if you're on the older versions or you're on premise, you can take advantage of that. The second one here, I have some links here, customer source. So if you are a Microsoft customer, you have access to customer source. As a partner, I go to partner source. But there is so much information on that website. If you don't have access to it, you need to talk to whoever handles your Microsoft customer account at your organization. It's probably somebody in IT. Get access. Again, it's free. It's no additional charge. And there are webinars. There are e-learning paths. The e-learning paths are fantastic. If you're looking to learn about a new feature, how's my time? 10 minutes. All right, if you're looking to learn a new feature, just for you to understand if maybe somebody has a future requirement that might be coming to fruition in the next year. Like maybe you're using CRM for sales, which is the typical first implementation, and you're thinking about moving over to service and implementing queues and auto routing and all kinds of cool stuff like that, but you might not be comfortable with it. Go to customer source, find an e-learning path, and just learn about it. It's fantastic. And if you can't do that during work, it's a really fun thing to do outside of work too. But these aren't necessarily good for end users. They're available. I wouldn't recommend it. So I put on here a link to Working with Dynamics 365 for Sales, which is not going to tell you a lick of anything custom to your sales process, but it's 6 hours and 42 minutes long. So I don't think it's best for end user materials, but if you're looking for maybe like a list of features you should cover for that user group, it's a good resource. You can check out the outline. The third thing I have here is gamification. So this is included with, I think, most licenses. I'm not a license expert, but it's no additional cost. You can implement gamification. Anytime you want to turn something like this on, I would strongly recommend putting that on in your sandbox environment first, not production until you've implemented it in sandbox. You had your user group test it out, tell you what they like. You've made modifications and configurations based on it. But gamification is really cool. It works really well for people who are naturally competitive, which usually aligns with your sales users. And you can create games. You can gamify anything in CRM. So it could be who's entered the most activities or who's closed the most leads or whatever your metrics are. You would set a sport and then let the game go. Put people on teams, and then you can kind of take Lee's tips with Lunch with Lee and all the different giveaways and incorporate that in gamification. So as on the admin side, it's a little hard to set up. It's a little cumbersome to set up in the beginning, but once you do it all, it's kind of there. So that's some Microsoft training materials available for you. Again, these custom training materials, I would really recommend if you have the time, the energy, and the resources. Cool. So we've come to our bonus extra tip, which is Lee's tip. I know the title of this is out-of-the-box configuration you can use today. That's why this is a bonus tip, because this isn't out-of-the-box configuration you can do today. But I'm going to let Lee talk about how his company uses Power BI.
I tell you, one of the things that really made a difference for us for getting people involved in CRM was the introduction of Power BI. We're lucky enough to have somebody who full-time job is doing Power BI, but you don't really need that. But just if you can start getting good at throwing some Power BI out there and showing people what the big picture is, I think sometimes that's just the biggest problem, that people don't understand by them, doing their day-to-day, activities and records and, adding all that stuff into CRM. They don't understand that the upper levels of managers are looking to see, what the sales pipeline's like. So if they're keeping all their opportunities entered and up to date in CRM, that shows up in Power BI. And at our organization, once everybody kind of got that concept, it was like turning the lights on. It wasn't something that I intentionally thought, we're going to do Power BI and we'll drive all this extra CRM stuff. It was just a nice thing that happened where once we introduced Power BI reports and dashboards and stuff, people went, oh my gosh, I see what I'm supposed to be doing here. Plus everybody else sees what I'm doing too. So for us, it really worked out nicely.
Cool. Thanks, Lee. So I have our contact information up here. And again, if you get these slides, we made links on all these things. So please feel free to reach out. I'm glad we have a couple minutes left. So Lori, are there any questions yet? I can go back into CRM and show some of the things I skipped over because I thought I was running out of time. If anyone wants to see anything, I can bring CRM up and we can kind of play in there. I'm just going to bring it up.
Fun webinar, you two. Yep, very fun webinar, you two. Great job. Okay, so this time I'm not seeing any questions in the queue, but yes, if you have questions, raise your hands. We'd love to hear from you live. Sometimes on these webinars, you get a little, our audience is quiet, so we'd love to hear from you. Raise your hand within the tool, and we can unmute your line. We did get a comment as I was talking here. All of this information was very helpful. Thank you. I think you are going to get lots of those types of comments in our survey as we conclude. So nothing else coming in at this point.
Okay.
Heidi, so if you want to show anything else, you got a couple minutes.
I was going to say, I'll just fill some airtime. Let's go back in here. So again, for those of you who aren't online, what I'm showing you is not the normal area. So this is, again, for Dynamics 365 online, this is the new interface to kind of manage your solution files and make changes and updates. It's the exact same thing. Why does that keep opening up all weird? It's just in a different spot. So this is our solution container, and I think I want to show you the relationship mapping. So we're on our lead, and if you're in here, I've just added a few things in here. Well, I guess it wasn't on the lead. So as a kind of like bonus thing that has nothing to do with user adoption, when you're adding files in your solution, it's always best practice to add the least amount of stuff you want. So I know it like auto checks you to add the whole entity, but we don't usually like doing that because then bad things can happen. All right, so here's our relationship. We're on the lead. I'm gonna try to find the opportunity. I thought that was on there. Let me refresh. If anyone wants to see something else, just type it in there and I'll just pivot. I should do the business process flow, so I'm gonna close that. While that's reloading, I'm gonna go back into this app designer.
One other thing you can do, at least for like I do for onboarding, well, I'm just filling time for you too. If you use something like Click Dimensions or some marketing thing, I've created an internal company that I don't let anybody else use but me, and I add all my CRM users to it as contacts. So when I
that's cool. So they could see all of the things.
So I'm technically marketing to my own internal people as customers. And
I like it. Every
time I onboard somebody, I send them specific email that's all nice and has the videos and the manuals and stuff. Plus you can make marketing lists to the specific groups.
Nice. I'm gonna come back to that. The app designer, we talked about sitemap. This is where you can limit what's seen. By default, when you add an entity, you'll see activities here because we added that to the sitemap. And by default, everything's available. So all of my users who are accessing this app, which again, I made for our inside sales audience, they'll see everything. So if I want to limit that and kind of streamline it for them, I'll just click on whatever I want to do. So views, for example, under activity. It auto checks to all, so my users can see absolutely everything. I just uncheck that box, and then I'm just gonna pick whatever I want them to see and save. And now when I go to my app, they only see the 3 views. So I like this, again, from that user perspective of it's just showing me what I need to do, my job, and it hides everything else. Like, I don't care what sales is doing or what service is doing. I just need to get my job done. I need my dashboard to look good, so that's all that I do. But if you're implementing this way, you just have to remember if someone's telling you, I can't see that view, you just have to come back in here and add any views that they might need as well. And that's super fun.
That's really cool.
Yay. Anything yet? I'm going to go to business rules then. How much time? I have like 30 seconds. Business rules. I like to maximize my time. You guys are feel free to drop off if you're bored. All right, so here's our business rule. Cool best practice for user adoption for you and system administrators. Make sure you name your business rule in something that makes sense. So I always put a business rule, a description, and I label all of my things here. It takes a little bit more time, but it's really helpful when you need to know what this does. So I'm going to deactivate this so I can do it. And this is using nested conditionals. So this is fun. So everything on a business rule is set by a conditional first. Every business rule will start with a conditional. When you got a blank canvas, this is already going to be here. And if you haven't built one before, it's very, very simple. So give it a display name, and you're going to say, what field is it? So project type, and this is my CRM system. So we work with Dynamics 365 projects, mobile, web, and other. And I want my sales team that if they select a project type of Dynamics 365, I'm over by 30 seconds. I want to hide fields that don't matter about that. I only want to show them Dynamics fields if they're selling a Dynamics project. If they're selling a mobile app, then I want to show other fields. So this is where you can kind of do that stuff. And you can set visibility, and I'm way out of time. I'm sorry. I'm good. Sorry about the fun. Any last thoughts, Lee?
No.
Did Lori kick us off yet?
All right. Pretty soon.
Okay. Thank you.
All
this
right.
was fun.
It was fun.
Definitely. Thank you, guys. One quick question that just came in. The blog that was suggested earlier, could one of you send me the link quick, and I will drop it into our chat window for the audience. Otherwise, I can follow up via email to our group as well.
So
yeah,
I just sent you out the link. It's the most recent one, I think. So at the very top, you can just click around. I haven't written this last one yet, but it'll be phenomenal.
I'm sure it will. Okay, I did drop it in the chat window for those of you that are looking for it. But awesome. Let's go ahead and wrap.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lee and Heidi. Great job. So yes, we will get the recording posted to our content library here within a couple hours. So if you registered for the link, look for that, or registered for the webinar, look for that link to come directly to your inbox. Also, as we close down, you will receive a quick survey. So appreciate you taking a couple moments, give these presenters some feedback, as well as any comments that you would like to share with the user group. So again, thank you all for being here. We look forward to having you back real soon, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.